So a brand new localization has been announced for Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, the first ever game in the Fire Emblem series and the first game to feature everybody's favorite Smash Bros. Pretty boy, Marth. Now with less pants. This may seem like a small thing, but it's actually incredibly interesting. I was hyped when it was first announced, but after a few minutes, I learned of the stuff they deliberately left out of the reveal trailer. And it just makes me more and more concerned about the direction this company is headed. Let's talk about all this stuff, keeping in mind that it's my personal experience. Please don't get mad at me. First of all, this is a limited release. Yeah, no. This is super scummy, and even the most ardent Nintendo supporters will acknowledge that fact. But what makes this especially terrifying is that we now know this isn't a one-and-done deal. It started out with the physical media. Amiibos and the classic system stock was arbitrarily limited to artificially boost demand. But I never would have believed Nintendo would do this with their games, and digital ones at that. When Mario 3D All-Stars became one of the top sellers of the year in only a week, thanks to scalpers and a fear of missing out, I knew this wouldn't be the end of the practice. But seeing it confirmed, it hits differently, man. Like, you could tell yourself that this was limited to Mario's anniversary, but now, who knows what Nintendo's gonna take from us in the future? I don't need to go in depth on why this is ethically dubious, so let's move on to an interesting tidbit I discovered. Fire Emblem is going to stop being distributed on March 31st. i.e. literally the exact day 3D All-Stars and Mario 35 are being pulled. What does this mean exactly? Originally, I thought Nintendo just set an arbitrary date to end all their Mario festivities, but Fire Emblem has nothing to do with that. Does this have anything to do with the Switch Pro rumors? Is Nintendo planning to revamp Nintendo Switch Online to be less objectively awful? Is it just for simplicity's sake? It's hard to say. My best guess for why this translation specifically is getting cut off is that it's getting the Star Fox 2 treatment. Attach it to a limited product to attract buyers, then a few months after it's off the market, add it to the NSO service. Now, normally I'd be neutral with this kind of thing if Nintendo was transparent about it, but if you bought an SNES Classic for Star Fox 2, you still have an SNES Classic. But if you buy this Shadow Dragon translation and it gets released for free, people are gonna get mad. That's unethical at best and a literal scam at worst. Which brings us to the price. $6 instead of being present on NSO is very interesting. I did a poll on Twitter about it, and opinions seem pretty split between fine as is and should have been on NSO. The last couple console generations, NES games did cost $5, but even during the Wii days, people said that was overpriced. And NSO mucks that up even further. $20 a year or less if you have a family plan for scores of NES and SNES games. That kind of brings what Nintendo itself thinks the value of these games are into question. I mean, you don't actually own them, but still. Sure, the apps are extremely bare bones. I made an entire video about that. But in that video, I also said that if new localizations of old games were gonna be a thing, it would probably come with an upgraded version of the service with a higher price tag. So I really shouldn't mind getting charged extra for this. Like, some might even say it sounds very whiny, but something about selling this game separately for that price, while NSO is still the way that it is, doesn't sit right with me. We specifically have the NSO service to give us access to Nintendo's NES library, and even though that service kinda sucks, Nintendo still just couldn't bear to give us one tiny thing. without charging $6 for another NES game on top of all the other NES games we're already paying for. If there's any proof that Nintendo super doesn't care about their online service and doesn't want to add any more value to it than they need to, well, this is it. I mean, free fan translations of this game have existed for years. Japanese fans have already had access to this entry on their NSO apps for no extra charge for literal months. And this game doesn't offer anything extra that putting it on the NSO app wouldn't have already accomplished. Maybe if it was a digital Eclipse-like situation, where there's lots of bonus historical content built in, or if the game had more exclusive new features and quality of life changes like the Sega Ages games. But it seems the sole purpose of this weird split from NSO is because they know they can get away with it, drastically upselling a 30-year-old game. But I didn't always feel this way is the weird thing. Back when Earthbound Beginnings was released, that game cost $7. And they didn't even do anything to make that. The translation had already existed, it was just never released. So why was I fine with that, but not with this? Like, legitimately, I don't know. Maybe my feelings have to do with how gatekeepy Nintendo has been with legacy content this generation. Back on the Wii U, we had access to NES through N64 games. We got Game Boy Advance, DS games. Heck, we even got Wii games, all within a comparatively reasonable time frame. All sold separately, all to keep permanently, all with no strings attached. Like, if this Fire Emblem thing happened in that era of Nintendo, I'd think it was neat and then been on my way. But lately, when it comes to older games, Nintendo has been absolutely awful. Like I've said many times, they put the absolute bare minimum effort into their current retro service, and also into their only other collection of games past the SNES, Mario 3D All-Stars, don't at me. They overcharge for almost all their legacy content outside of NSO, and now apparently they're gonna constantly arbitrarily limit access to them. They just never seem to want to give us too much value for anything outside of their newly developed titles. I'd highly recommend the video Super Mario 3D All-Stars is Pathetic by King K if you want to see where I'm coming from. The title is super inflammatory, but he spits straight facts throughout the whole thing, so I can't complain. Okay, look, I know that localization is not easy and deserves to be compensated fairly for, but up against everything, this Fire Emblem release seems to just be another instance of Nintendo wanting to extract as much money from their fans as possible. I mean, if they released it on NSO and still did the special edition, the combination of subscription fees and special edition purchases would pay for that localization and then some. But why only get a lot of money when you could have all the money? I know this is how, like, all corporations act, but it sucks to see Nintendo act like this. I honestly hate how I have to get so upset about this. But Nintendo's handling of both its legacy content and Nintendo Switch Online are by far the worst things about Nintendo this generation. And this is just so close to being a step in the right direction. Imagine a future where Nintendo starts translating all its region-locked legacy content, putting it on NSO for all Switch owners to enjoy for years to come. Maybe this could lead to NSO finally being that amazing collection of games I know it can be. But I mean, we don't even know if Fire Emblem is coming to NSO at all. They may very well remove it forever. We just don't know. I can hope beyond hope that the reason all the legacy games, and Mario 35, are getting scrapped is because Nintendo is doing an overhaul or something next year, and will give them all back to us in some form. But that's still an anti-consumer farce. I want to be excited about all the translations this could open the door for, but those would probably be limited releases too. And since Nintendo is being so stingy about it, what games are even viable? Considering the rollout on the actual app, I'm inclined to think they don't particularly care. I mean, we don't even have Earthbound. What makes you think they'll go through the effort to translate Joy Mech Fight or Panel de Pawn? It just seems like there's not enough money in it for them to even bother. Nintendo has been making so many boneheaded decisions lately. It seems like the only non-controversial releases we're even gonna get in this second half of 2020 is a spin-off made by a completely different company. And that makes me very sad. I follow Nintendo because they aren't like the other AAA developers. But more and more lately, they've been acting so sleazy. Not when they're developing new games, usually, or in the ways that game developers are usually flat out evil, but more as service providers, as IP holders, and hardware and software manufacturers. They're just getting worse and worse. I don't know if this has to do with Iwata's passing. Maybe Nintendo is desperate to increase sales to recoup the losses caused by the coronavirus. Or maybe the runaway success of the Switch has simply made them cocky, which seems to happen a lot. Whatever the case may be, I can only hope that it doesn't stay this way.